Good morning. So today I'm going to continue my talks on the Paramitas, and today it's Shanti, which is patience, and Shanti starts with a K, so it's Kshanti, Shanti. And when I think about Shanti, it always reminds me of that novel of Hermann Hesse's called Siddhartha, which is a fictionalized life of the Buddha. It's not exactly the Buddha, but it's somebody with the same name as the Buddha. And when he was looking for employment in this book, they asked him what his qualifications were, and he said, I can read, I can write, and I can wait. I thought that was an interesting thing to put on your resume. So obviously it meant he had patience. And I was just reflecting on that this morning about waiting. Just being able to wait sometimes takes a lot of discipline, doesn't it? And then I was reflecting on those Kurosawa movies about samurai, and quite often there would be a samurai who would just who was preparing for some kind of a confrontation, and he would just sit down and cross his legs, and just sit there, waiting for whatever the moment was when things would arise. So, yeah. So we're not, in our country, it's not a virtue. We won't, I remember when I worked in business, they always would want things to be done quickly, inexpensively, and done well, right? And I had a boss, actually, who was pretty clever, who would say to his bosses, well, I can give you 2 out of 3. Pick which 2 you want. Do you want it fast? Do you want it cheap? Or do you want it of good quality? I'll give you 2 out of 3. Yeah. So Shanti means patience or forbearance, and forbear means to hold yourself back, and patience can mean bearing pains and trials calmly, excuse me, without complaint, or steadfast despite opposition or difficulties or adversity. And if we think about it carefully, they could have both positive and negative implications. Like a beast of burden. I mean, just it carries the load until can't carry it anymore, and then just collapses and dies. That's not exactly our what do I say, our goal or our desire in our life. So we have to have some discerning wisdom too, but let's think about it. But as long as we live in the world, and the Buddha taught in the Four Noble Truths that there's all kinds of suffering. There's the pain and lamentations and anxieties just caused by life itself. There's all kinds of difficulties, and then there's sickness, old age, and death. And due to all these various kinds of sufferings and causes of suffering, sometimes our life is referred to as a land of patience, because without patience, we couldn't really survive. And one of the many names of the Buddha is he who is able to be patient. And it's a good practice. And if we're patient, we don't get frustrated. So I'm going to read a paragraph, which is an idealized presentation of Kshanti Paramita. It says the essence of this paramita of patience is a strength of mind and heart that enables us to face challenges and difficulties of life without losing our composure and inner tranquility. We embrace and forbear adversity, insult, distress, the wrongs of others with patience and tolerance, free of resentment, irritation, emotional reactivity, or retaliation. We cultivate the ability to be loving and compassionate in the face of criticism, misunderstanding, or aggression. With this enlightened quality of patience, we are neither elated by praise, prosperity, or agreeable circumstances, nor are we angry, unhappy, or depressed when faced with insult, challenge, hardship, or poverty. This enlightened attribute of patience, acceptance, and tolerance is not a forced suppression or denial of our thoughts and feelings. Rather, it is a quality of being that comes from having our hearts open and our minds deeply concentrated upon the Dharma. In this way, we have a clear and correct understanding of impermanence, of cause and effect, or karma, and with strong determination and patience, we remain in harmony with this understanding for the benefit of all beings. The ability to endure, to have forbearance, is integral to our Dharma practice. Without this kind of patience, we cannot accomplish anything. So that's, like I said, that's the idealized version. So it's, you might think while I was reading it, boy, that's asking a lot, you know. But can anybody really be like that? Well, well, let's take it as an archetype, right? You know, and archetypes are a representation. So, but there is a story in one of the sutras about a man who was named Funda, and he was a merchant, and he used to carry foods to sell or trade. And one day he was traveling and he encountered the Buddha and his disciples. And when he heard the Buddha's sermon, he was so impressed that right away he became a student of the Buddha and joined the Sangha. He was a brilliant, wonderful man, and eventually he accomplished arhatship, you know, which is awakening. And the arhats are those who have accomplished their individual practice. And the Buddha told him, "Now I wish you to leave and be with the people to expound the Buddha's teachings, the way of enlightenment." And he assigned Funda to go to the west side of India. And Buddha asked him, he said, "Those people who are living there are rough, mean people. If they insult you, what are you going to do?" And Funda told the Buddha, "I will consider them to be good people because they didn't hit or kick me." And the Buddha said, "If they hit and kick you, how are you going to react?" And Funda said, "I will still think they're good people because they didn't beat me with sticks or throw stones." And the Buddha said, "If they beat you with sticks and throw stones, what will you do?" And Funda said, "I will still think they're good people because they don't injure me with a dagger or knife." And the Buddha said, "If they do that, how would you react?" And he said, "I would still think they're good people because they don't kill me." And the Buddha said, if they're going to kill me, what will you do? Kill you, what would you do? And Funda said, I'd still appreciate them. Among the Buddha's disciples are many who are willing to die, willing to end their lives, because life is so painful. If they're going to take my life, I would be glad to let them. And the Buddha said, if you have that much patience, your mission will be successful. And as a matter of fact, Funda did go to the west of India, and a large gathering gathered around him. A large number of disciples gathered around him, hundreds. But when I think about patience and what determines whether we have patience or not, I see it's closely tied with faith. Faith in ourselves, faith in the practice, faith in others. So I don't think we can examine patience without examining faith as well. So what does faith mean? So relating to our Zen practice, we have to understand what the point of our practice is. Very simply said, the point is to realize and actualize our Buddha nature, our true nature, or whatever you want to call it. And I often repeat what Bernie Glassman said, that the point of our practice is to realize the oneness and interdependence of life. So that's what our Buddha nature is, the oneness and interdependence of life. And as many teachers have said, our life is no other than the life of the Buddha. It means that our life is the enlightened life. We just have to realize it. And he said that the Buddha said everyone without exception, from the beginning, is a Buddha. And if we have faith in those statements, then right there, most of our problems are taken care of. Yasutani Roshi, who was one of Maizumi Roshi's teachers, in one of his writings said, once you establish firm belief or faith in Buddha nature, you're driven to discover it with all the force of your being. So if you really believe it's true, then why don't we put ourselves 100% into realizing that it's so? So when we reflect on it, we think that we have all kinds of barriers that prevent us from doing it, and we lead busy lives, and we have other commitments, other obligations, other priorities. But the advice of the third patriarch always comes to my mind. He said, don't seek for the truth. The truth isn't somewhere outside of yourself. Just cease to cherish your own opinions. It's our own judgments, our own opinions that we're hanging on to. Those are the barriers. It's not a question of having enough time or having enough commitment. But if we're just committed to that one thing, to look at what our cherished opinions and judgments and ideas and projections are, and how they serve us, and are they really supporting our practice, supporting our faith in our practice, and supporting this paramita of patience. when we think about strong faith, yeah, we usually don't think it's a matter of letting go. We think it's more an attempt to control everything. You know, like in our country, it's there's freedom of religion, right? And I think that what that means is that you're free to practice your religion, but you're not free to impose your religion on me. But that's what sometimes people turn faith into. I have such strong faith in this that it's the truth and that everybody has to do it. See? But that's not faith. That's control, right? So that trying to control the situation where we can determine how things are and then really feel secure in the fact that things are exactly the way we see them, as I said, that's not faith, because one of the teachings of the Buddha is impermanence. Things are always changing, so we don't know anything for sure. So we have to keep stepping into the unknown and face all of our doubts and uncertainties. And to do that, it takes faith. To look into the dark corners of our personalities takes faith. There's a quote by Master Basui, a Japanese Zen master, a couple hundred years ago. And he wrote a letter to one of his students. And he said that the realization of self-nature is the sole cure for all mind illness. Don't rely on any other remedy. Have I not already quoted to you, find the subject that casts the shadows. It's the very source of all Buddhas. Your Buddha nature is like the jewel sword of the Vajra king. Whoever touches it is killed. But of course, when he means killed, it means, dying your small self. Yeah. Or it's like a massive raging fire and everything within reach loses its life. Again, the life of the small self. Once you realize your true nature, all evil bent of mind arising from karma, extending over innumerable years past, is instantly annihilated, like snow put in a roaring furnace. No thought of Buddha or truth remains. How can any mind illness persist? Why can't the karmically begotten delusion and manifold discriminative thoughts and notions of the unenlightened mind be quelled? Simply because true self-realization has not taken place. You could no more stop yourself from being driven within the 6 realms of ceaseless change without first realizing your self-nature than you can stop water from boiling without quenching the fire beneath it. So Basui is emphasizing his realization of our true self. And part of realizing the true self involves delving deep into the dark, hidden places in our own mind. And that's what we emphasize here at Great Mountain Zen Center. And Basui is saying that without realizing it, we won't be able to stop our wandering, delusive thoughts any more than we can stop water from boiling unless we quench the fire underneath it. So how does that help us? How does that encourage and support us in our practice? You might find it more discouraging than encouraging, actually. So let's bring it back to patience. So how could we possibly have patience unless it was guided? Like I said, the patience we're talking about here isn't the patience of a beast of burden that keeps walking with a load on its back until it finally collapses. So if we don't have belief, or if we don't have faith, we don't have confidence that we can put an end to suffering, to this discomfort, then we can't have patience either. So in your practice, sometimes you might experience one moment of clarity, one moment of spaciousness, one moment where you're connecting with your quiet center. And just that one moment encourages us to have faith and to have patience. And just staying present with it through all kinds of discomfort, we're able to experience more clarity and spaciousness. You know, it starts with a small snowball rolling down the slope, gathering momentum and becoming larger, until it's a huge snowball, snow boulder. So having faith, we can be patient in our practice. And then being patient, still a question arises of what's the best way to practice. And I've talked about this many times too. The best way is to get rid of whatever is extra. We don't practice in order to gain something. These might be consequences that we realize peace of mind or feel more comfortable in our bodies. But that's our natural state that's obscured by all of the cherished views and opinions and judgments. See, we're carrying something around that we don't need. So if we practice to get rid of something extra, then our practice is no longer a project that we're trying to get something, but it's an expression of who we are that comes out. I once read about Einstein being asked about his creativity, and he touched upon the subject of patience. He said, the search for physical truth, or for in the realm of his field of study, he said it could take years of groping in the dark and having no result. He says, hence the ability to hold on to a problem for a long time and not be destroyed by repeated failure is necessary for any serious researcher. So this can apply to our own practice. We can say, the research, which is to realize our true self, can take years of groping in the dark, hence the ability to hold on to that question, your aspiration, for a long time without being destroyed by what we perceive to be repeated failure. It's necessary for any serious Zen student. So our tendency is to think of somebody as successful as Einstein and believe it wasn't difficult for him. he said he had to struggle for years and years in the dark without knowing what he was doing. It's not only Einstein, but think about the life of the Buddha. Same thing. At the time when he started to practice, he had to develop his own system, his own way of approaching it. And he spent years groping in the dark with all kinds of practices. Spent many years as an ascetic, thinking that was the path, until he finally had to let that go. And it's true for many of our Zen ancestors. And as we said, that very failure itself becomes a success, although it's strange to talk about it, practice in terms of success and failure. So Trungpa Rinpoche, who started the Shambhala tradition here in Colorado, he talked about being impeccable. That means being disciplined. And I have come to realize that without discipline, there's no freedom, no liberation. Just think of it in your own life. So all of us have acquired some skill, but it doesn't always come easy. Take a musician, it takes tremendous discipline in order to be able to improvise or to be creative. When you first start to learn an instrument, your fingers or your mouth don't even know what to do or where to go. You practice and you practice and you practice. Then it becomes more natural. You don't have to think about it. I was also thinking about some of you are computer programmers or developers, same thing. You reach a point where you have so many tools in your toolkit, which the right ones are. And that comes from discipline. And that's an important part of our practice, is discipline. And that discipline gives us the strength to endure. So everything comes full circle. We're back to patience again. So it's important that we have patience with vision, where we can see the situation clearly. But we also need determination and faith and questioning. And Master Dogen said that when the Bodhisattva mind stirs, there's an impulse to practice the way of the Buddhas. So each one of you, your Bodhisattva mind has stirred. And you had that impulse to practice the way of the Buddhas. So our practice going forward is to clarify that vision. And as you clarify that vision, your strength, your faith becomes stronger. And as your faith becomes stronger, you begin to realize that your Zazen is a Zazen of the Buddhas. One side of thinking about patience is to think of it as being passive, but there's an active, positive patience as well. We don't need to be quiet and incapable like a 20-year-old cat. Patience does not mean to never be angry. Sometimes it's necessary. The Zendo and all of the Zen temples have protectors called Fudo-myo, and we have little heads of Fudo-myo as a protector. And sometimes he's carries a sword in one hand and a rope in another, and he looks fierce and angry with flames behind him. And he said he's a manifestation of Mahavairochana Buddha. And he gets angry about people who are lazy in their practice. And he glares at everyone who enters the Zendo and questions their intentions. So Dogen wrote that practicing together for the sake of the monks, with all our might, shout at them, scold them. So that might work in Japan in a monastery, but here in America, not so sure. I think we need some reasons to practice. I don't think that too many of you would be here if I shouted at you all the time. I don't know. Maybe I ought to try it and see. But there's a reason. It doesn't have to be shouting, but the reason is that our practice works. You know, as I said before, I started practicing, soon it'll be 60 years ago. And if it didn't work, I wouldn't be doing it for 60 years if I didn't see it work in others. But in order for it to work, we have to be impeccable, like Trungpa said, and we have to be very clear and precise. And part of that, of course, is we have to be patient. We have all kinds of expressions, don't we? Rome wasn't built in a day. It's one of them. You know that famous question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Yeah. But then I just saw a kid's joke the other day. He says, how do you put an elephant in a refrigerator? And the answer is you open the door to the refrigerator, you put the elephant in, and then you close the door. It's simple, right? So our practice is simple, but it's not easy. And the reason it's not easy is because we want it to be easy. You know? I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? But once we get past all of our resistance and our barriers and our misgivings, and we see the value of our practice, and as Yasutani Roshi said, you know, we go for it with all of our intention. See? And of course, it always depends on our situation, whatever it is, but still, we have to maintain patience. So far I've talked about generosity or dana, discipline, or sila, precepts, Kshanti, patience. And next week we'll have Shishin, and the week after that I'll talk about the next paramita, which is virya, which means effort. How do we make the right effort in our practice? So let's finish there and see if anybody has any comments or questions.